Welcome back. I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne. This is Inside Exec. We are looking at some topics that we're revisiting from our 20 question series in 2017. So 7 years ago. We have been doing this for such a long time. Still finding things to talk about. None of you will be surprised that Fulyana can still find things to talk about. I have known her for over 40 years and I'm never surprised that she can find something to talk about.
I don't want to take all the credit. It's a team's effort.
Interesting, because today we're going to talk about teams. And one of the issues that we talked about briefly in our 20 question series was about dealing with a negative group atmosphere at work. Now, obviously in 2017, we were talking about a group of people in the same physical environment. And as we all know, our work situations have changed somewhat since then. But what we thought we would do today is talk about the fact that it may well be a negative environment for the team because they have had to come back to a single physical environment. And there is some perhaps underlying feeling of resentment that they have to do that they feel like they're not trusted to work from home, that all of those years that they did work from home, their input is not as valued as perhaps the effort that they put in. And I know for a lot of people, working from home made them work harder because they could be more organised, more focused, less travel time. They could get the balance of their lives differently. They were happier because they were able to do other things apart from work and the associated things that happen around that. Some weren't, but for the most part, I think people that I have interacted with gave their all to that period of time when they were working from home and found that worked for them. It didn't for everyone. And so you might well have a team where some are happy to be back in the physical environment and others are not. And you have to deal with that negativity or the potential negative in the team as well. So let's talk about how you deal with that negative group atmosphere when you are the team leader or the executive in charge. I guess the obvious thing we're going to say is you've got to find the root cause. You've got to find why people are being unhappy or why there is this negative environment and address the elephant in the room about, yes, we all have to be here. And that's the decision that's been made. Do you go through the exercise of getting everyone to write down why they're unhappy and get it out in the open? Or do you just, as the leader, do you just say, okay, I know that these are the things that you might be feeling, so let's just put them on the whiteboard or on the wherever, let them sit there. We acknowledge that these are the things. What are we going to do to ensure that we as a team bring ourselves back to being a cohesive unit rather than lots of individual contributions? Yeah. I shall leave my comments there.
I agree with all of that, obviously, but I also want to add...
Obviously, no chance otherwise.
You know what I mean. There's a couple of things. I want to talk a bit about being in charge of a team in that situation, but also as one of the team members, it can also be not pleasant to be part of a situation like that. So at the end of the day, after you do everything you said, I think it would be helpful to also talk about the positives. Right. So yes, we're back in the office. And yes, it's compared to what you've been doing before. I can hear it. I feel it myself. But what about the opportunity for us to actually do things that we couldn't do as well when we're working from home, and particularly the social interaction and stuff like that? Just bringing them to the table as well, so they don't just see the downside of coming into the office, but they can see it. And then talk about what else, what have we learned from that, and what will work for us in this environment for now, or when should we review it? Maybe, yes, we all hate the idea, but we've got to do it, as you said, and do it but can we at least put somewhere that we can look at it again in X months? So that people feel like it's not just been forgotten. And I think that would be helpful. As a team member, it's very, very hard sometimes because you might not agree, or you do agree, but you just want to get on with it. You don't want to be talking about it continuously and this negativity going into a spiral downwards. So what do you do in that situation? Very similar, acknowledge and say, yeah, I feel that way, and then just keep changing the subject to the topic that you're there to discuss, rather than let's have another 5 minutes complaining about the negative aspects of being back in the office in this scenario.
It goes back to how you came back to work as a team. So did everybody come back at the same time? Mm-hmm. And if they didn't, is there resentment about when people came back, if it was a staged return? And it's also about recognising that perhaps the team wasn't as wonderful before you went on the working from home experience. And looking at some of the makeup of the team might have changed as well. And certainly people's outside life will have changed in that period of time, because we're now talking for a period of minimum 2 years and probably 3 years that people have not worked in this team in the same physical environment. In hindsight, look back with our rose-coloured glasses, perhaps it wasn't as good. And maybe another exercise is to say, well, what did you like about being in the team here before we went into the lockdown series? And is that still here? And you actually just call out the things that they think are not right, rather than have them say, just the constant complaining, but involve them in doing that, in that looking back, in that review of what was it like before 2020? Why is that different now? And if it's different because the economic environment has changed, the work processes have changed, because perhaps a lot of systemised stuff has been introduced that wasn't there before. And so there was the opportunity, as you say, for more social associated interaction. Physically, they're probably not all sitting in the same desks as they were. So maybe it's just about that basic physical environment they're not as comfortable with. Perhaps they've got other solutions or other suggestions about that side of thing. But I think it's about not just taking on board that it's negative now, but looking back to see what it was like before lockdown and being realistic about that, and looking at how you can regain that atmosphere. If they think that was the great atmosphere, then that's what they're missing. And if it's not, if it was just when they look back and they say, yeah, it was okay, well, that's not positive. And so you have to recognise that perhaps it's not as negative as you're feeling or they're saying, because it wasn't roses beforehand. But it's also about revisiting some of the team building exercises that we used to do in the 80s and 90s, the 1990s, the last century, when we did training last century, and actually bringing people back together as a group. Don't just expect that because they used to work together and now they have to work together again, that it'll all just pick up where they left off. If you've got friends that you can do that with, you understand how valuable that is, and that it is not the norm. And that for the most part, if we know people well and we don't see them for 3 or 4 years except electronically, we can't, when we're in the physical environment, pick up where we left off. Now, I'm very fortunate in that whenever I see Fulyana physically, we hit ourselves up for a meal. And so we have that common ground that we can work on. But that said, in jest, it is a valid way of engaging the group again, making them recognise one another again. And perhaps, as I said, in a physical environment, you've got people sitting close to one another who weren't close previously, and time has passed, and so they're older and they've got different experiences, and they have the opportunity to bring other things to the table that mightn't have been as useful pre-lockdown series. So you've got so much range that you can draw on to bring people together that focus on that. Don't just say, okay, well, everyone's back in the one room now, we better do something to make them feel like they're a team. You have to be committed to making them a team if you want them to be a team. So maybe that's the other thing that you need to look at is, do I need them to be a team? Is this a long-term environment where they will all have to interrelate and work with one another and are dependent on one another for their part of a process? Look at it far more broadly than just bringing the team back together in the physical environment, because absolutely everything has changed.
Yeah, and to that point, nearly every organization would not go back to how it was anyway, because they either grown as an organization because the period of time, they might have mergers, acquisitions, so they're working with someone else. So it's very, very important. So back to the leadership responsibility of communication and the purpose and the reason for doing that. The other thing is, even within your part of the organization, there people have started while we're in lockdown and working remotely that nobody knows other than seeing a picture or on Teams meeting. You never really met them in person. And it is valuable to have that connection. So again, it's by running it by saying, look, one of the things is our team has grown, or we had major redundancies and now we got this. Explain that background, the reason, again, even though you've done it so many times already, and how us being back in the office, the purpose, the reason, and the expected outcome of us being in the office, and maybe the review, as I said before, but also who are the new players that we have started since the time we didn't come physically together. And the team building activities would be perfect, as you said, because now there's new people that know each other, people that know each other less, and there is people that are new to the game altogether. So what best time is to do it now and get them to know each other. Even if you reviewed it, so I don't really need them to work as a team, I find very, very rare situation when that applies, because somebody always depends on someone else. You're either supplying it or receiving it or part of the process. So you need to work with each other.
In terms of those team building exercises too, I know there's a wealth of them out there. They're all valuable in some way, and they've all been designed to help you and help teams build. But look for the ones that are going to actually make people work as a team rather than theoretical, this will build a team, but look at things and look at it outside of the survival style ones, because that puts people in an unrealistic situation. In my mind, I won't use the survival type exercises. I won't use the trust exercises, because once again, that's a step too far for this initial exercise. And I really am a fan of the outdoor exercise. So the one that I use the most is having groups fly a kite. Individually, it's something that they think they can all do, but what it does more than anything else is encourage communication. And it encourages storytelling, because people talk about when they first flew a kite or when they first made a kite, or they might have some other knowledge about the wind because of an activity they do outside of work that relies on wind, whatever else it is. And it gets people talking about things that are not work, but about an activity that in essence they all share knowledge of. And so everyone's on a sort of level playing field before they start the exercise. And I know Fulyana's been through this exercise where I've done the kite flying exercise. And the time that she was there was a very disparate group who were not good at communicating with one another or with management at the time. And I think what it does is, in every time I've used it, it has encouraged people not just to get outside and do something, whether they physically can or not, but it's about that communication, and that's what it's for, because the basis of any good team is communication, regardless of whatever else happens. And once they've been through that exercise, they fall back on that experience each time, and each of the individual members feels like they've got a little bit better knowledge of everybody else. And if they've got nothing else that they can talk about, they can say, it was windy out there today, would have been a good day for the kites. Just a simple comment when they walk past someone's desk reconnects them and keeps them connected with that one strand of shared experience.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that kite exercise. Certainly our group got a lot out of it. And yes, definitely the communication. It's sort of like you're assuming that someone knows, but they don't. And they're assuming you know, and you don't, and vice versa.
probably given you some ideas about how to deal with those situations. It's very much a case of don't expect it to be like it was. And remember that the team all has something that they can give to the team and to one another. We once again value your input into how you are dealing with those situations where you're bringing a team back into a physical environment where they haven't been a team or haven't been in the physical environment for some time. What we've found over the years is when we can share those experiences of other listeners, it just adds to the value that Fulyana and I can give to these sessions. So please let us know what your feelings are about dealing with that negative group environment when you're back in a physical location. For now, I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec.